Okay, guys, welcome back to the second key knowledge dot point of Unit for Outcome 2. This one is all about responding to KPIs. Okay, so here is our study design, and here, pretty chunky one, this one, because you can see it says management strategies to respond, blah, blah, and then it lists a whole bunch of strategies. That's why it's so long. So basically, this is one of those key knowledge dot points that gives us a script. Basically, it lists the strategies that you need to know that could be questioned and you could use to answer any question they could potentially throw at you. So this gives you a fairly extensive script here. Okay, now just going to put out there here, there was a slight change to the study design with the new study design this year, 2023. So the current study design, again, I've just re-highlighted there, the top one, circled in red. Previous study design, what's in this current key knowledge dot point was kind of split across two. Okay, so we have the management strategies, which is the bulk of this anyway, but then there was a second key knowledge dot point previously. It said management strategies to seek new business opportunities both domestically and globally. Now, we've lost that key knowledge dot point, but you notice within the current one, the red one at the top there, it says and or seek new business opportunities. So we've lost the domestically and globally part of it, but it's incorporated that within here. Now, we're not quite sure what that means in terms of treatment, in terms of questions from VCAR, but what I'm going to do in this video is kind of almost treat it like we did previously. So we're going to talk about strategies responding to KPIs, and I'm going to separate out and cover afterwards strategies to seek new business opportunities. Now, one of the reasons for doing that is because where it says there management strategy to respond to key performance indicators and or seek new business opportunities, most of the strategies listed there are not really about or suitable for seeking new business opportunities. One or two of them are, and I'll mention as we go through, but we certainly have, from teaching the last study design, some strategies which are not listed there, which absolutely are focused on seeking new business opportunities. So although those ones are not mentioned in study design, at the end of this video, I'm still going to talk about those. I think it's just a safer option. Look, if you look at the different textbooks that are out at the moment, some of them don't even seem to mention seeking new business opportunities anymore. They kind of all treat it in different ways. So I just think the safest way is to still kind of separate those two things out and make sure that you have strategies in your notes that could do both of those things. First off, responding to KPIs, and second off, to seek new business opportunities. Okay, hopefully that kind of makes some sense. Just trying to explain why I'm going to cover this the way I'm covering it, because we're kind of not really sure. There wasn't much guidance from VCAR, or we don't really know yet because there hasn't been any exam or any questions how this might go. So I'm still going to split them out. So first off, we're going to look at how those management strategies listed there can be used to respond to the KPIs that we learned in 4.1. So there was 10 odd KPIs. Then we're going to look at a few strategies that business can use to develop new business opportunities. There's kind of two, I guess, main sections to this video. So first part, responding to KPIs. So this is the list. All I've done is bullet pointed the list that we saw in that study design, just separate them out, make them easier to see. Okay. So these are strategies. So these are the ones we want to focus on. Okay. Because they're listed in the study design, because they're in the script, these are the ones that you could always use to answer a question, and they can only ask you about these particular ones. Okay. Even though these are not the only strategies that exist to respond to KPIs, again, because these are the ones in study design, this is the ones to focus on. Now, the good thing about this is that most of those strategies you may already have picked up on are not new. Okay, all the ones I've just put into green, we've already seen in past parts of the course, and in the red there, I've just identified which outcome that we found them in. Okay, so most of the strategies are not new. So as we go through this, I'm not going to go into much depth about the actual strategy itself, because you already should have the knowledge to back that up. Okay. What we're going to talk about here is how that strategy can be used to respond to KPI data that we might see. 3 left in black. Those are the only 3 which we've not seen explicitly in other parts of the course so far. So I will talk about those 3 strategies in a little bit more detail. But all the ones you see in green there, you will recognize from reading through that list that you'll recognize that stuff. Okay. So quick recap on KPIs, okay, from the last outcome. Okay. Should remember this because it was the most recent outcome. You've only just done the SAC, so this should be familiar to you. But look, managers need to work out which KPIs they're going to track and then measure by thinking about what's important for that particular business. Okay, what does good performance look like in this business? So realistically, how that plays out, you measure a range of KPIs to look at different aspects of the business's performance. That can be harder for small businesses because they don't generate the amount of information that large businesses do. Okay, large businesses have finance departments with management accountants whose job it is to do exactly this. Okay, my very first job out of uni, I was a management accountant for BP, and this is what I did. You know, we had KPIs we're measuring. I would find that information on our systems, produce graphs, charts, blah blah blah, and present it on a monthly basis to different departmental managers. That was my job. Smaller businesses, a little different because they're not generating the volumes of information that those large businesses are. But fundamentally, the idea is still there. Okay. So KPIs need to be measured and monitored over time. And then you track trends. Okay. Remember that's how KPIs are used fundamentally. Okay. You're tracking them over time. We're looking, are they increasing in the right direction or are they changing in the right direction? Obviously, some KPIs we want to go up. Sales, profit. Some we want to go down, staff turnover, absenteeism. And if you do this over an extended period of time, you can then establish useful patterns and trends, which then highlight the need for change. Okay. So for example, on average, you've made around $1 million profit per year for the last 5 years, but this year you've made $300,000. Now looking at $300,000 in isolation is no good to you because $300,000 is still a substantial amount of money. But looking at the trend over time, that tells you that that's not a good result because for the past 5 years, we've made $1 million. Therefore, it's that trend that tells us that change needs to be made to get the profit back up to where it was previously. Okay, so that's how KPIs are used. So the process goes something like this. Okay, determine the KPIs that are relevant for your business and therefore the ones that you need to measure. Apply thresholds to those KPIs. So in other words, at what point does a variation over time become relevant? Okay, when it changes by 10%, 20%, when it doubles. So you need to work out, when things become an issue. You then investigate the variation. Okay, work out why that has happened. So our staff turnover has doubled over the last 2 years. So you now need to investigate why our staff turnover has doubled in the last 2 years, because that's not a good thing. And then you need to come up with strategies to overcome those issues. And that is what this key knowledge dot point is all about. That last part there, okay? Coming up with the strategies that allow you to make changes in the business that are going to address issues with KPIs. Okay, that's our focus here. Okay, so always have that at the back of your mind. So now get into the gist of this. So once we've established we have variations in our KPIs that are not good, the next logical step, have some strategies which we can use to respond to this. That's why this Keynote dot point said responding to KPIs. Okay, strategies used to respond to KPIs. If the business is not able to respond to the changes that are occurring in our KPIs, what's the point of measuring them? Okay, the whole point of measuring KPIs is to give us that information that informs us that changes need to be made. Okay, if a business is not able to respond to the data being measured, it might not survive. Okay, so that's why this is so important. So really, in a nutshell, what you need to be able to do here, and I talk about this as being, this is kind of more a skill, okay, rather than just learning rote fashion a pile of notes. You need to kind of have the ability to do this. Okay, what you need to be able to do is look at some KPI data provided in the question, and then basically come up with a strategy which is going to help improve that data moving forward. Okay. So, like I've already said, a lot of what we look at here isn't new. Most of the strategies we've already seen. Okay, the strategies listed in study design are things we've already looked at somewhere else in the course, apart from those three. So now it's just about connecting those strategies to KPIs. Okay, we didn't do that when we initially looked at those strategies. Okay, so now we're thinking about all those strategies we looked at over the course of this year. Now what we're doing is now making a connection. When should the business actually be using them? Okay, so now it's time to look at each of those strategies and how we can use them to get our business back on track in response to KPI data. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's about making links. Okay, that's what you're doing here. Okay, on the left, we have the KPIs. These are just the KPIs that were identified in outcome 4.1, which you should now know about. On the right are our list of strategies, which are listed in this particular key knowledge dot point, which this video is all about. So it's just about making the links between these two lists, essentially. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Make links between those strategies and those KPIs, explaining how those strategies can improve those KPIs. So like I said, rote learning each combination if I go back to this, learning each combination of how these can all interrelate is not the way to go, okay? Because you'd be here forever. There would literally be hundreds of different combinations of how the strategies can link to those KPIs. Not the way to go. So what you need to be able to do is learn how to come up with strategies and explanations when you're presented with a particular combination. So in this video, what I do more is give you some examples of how this kind of plays out, but I can't cover everything. So your notes are not necessarily going to cover every kind of possible combination or permutation of how this might come up in a question or in a case. But the idea is if you get how this works and you really understand the strategies and you understand these KPIs, you should be able to make the connection and make the links yourself. As we kind of move through this, that hopefully will make some more sense to you, okay? So the way these questions generally work is it gives you some information about the business, and within that information, there's some issues with KPIs, okay? So profits falling, absenteeism is increasing, waste is increasing, whatever it might be, okay? It then asks you to suggest and justify a strategy that could be used to help improve that particular KPI that there's an issue with, okay? So what we're looking here, like I said, is looking at matching strategies with KPI improvements, and I'll give you some examples to demonstrate how you make those connections. So let's start off with, we're going to go through those strategies listed in the study design here. So we go back to this screen here. So staff training, okay, we're going to start with staff training. So basically, what we're saying is here is which KPIs that you see on the left there, again, that's our complete list of KPIs, which of those KPIs could be positively impacted by carrying out some staff training? That's fundamentally what we're saying here. Which of those KPIs, if they're moving in the wrong direction, could we improve by staff training? Now, I would suggest for this particular one, pretty much all of them, okay? Any of those KPIs, if they're going in the wrong direction, you could help improve by implementing some staff training. Now, it's not as simple as that because it depends on who you're going to train and, you know, what training you're going to offer. You can't just leave it staff train. It's not, you've got to take it to the next level. So for example, level of wastage. Okay, we know that level of wastage is really a measure used in our operations function. Okay, so the training, if you're going to use that as an example, you're going to be talking about training the staff at working operations, maybe to be more accurate or whatever it might be, using the resources better to reduce wastage. If we're talking about percentage of market share. Again, that might actually involve training the people that are producing the product, so training operations to make a better product. Okay, if you can make a better product, that as long as your competitors are not also making a better product at the same time, now comparatively, you're making a better product compared to your competitors, which should increase market share. But it might involve training your sales staff, for example. Might involve training your advertising and marketing people to come up with better ad campaigns. So it can play out in lots of different ways. So this is what you need to be able to do. You need to be able to come up with ways when you're given a scenario of how these two things kind of interplay. So just two examples here, okay? Two of many, 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 okay? So business has decreasing number of sales over a period of time. They might decide to implement staff training for the sales staff to improve the situation. Training those staff in sales skills and product knowledge will improve their ability to assist the customer and close a sale, therefore leading to an increase in number of sales. So remember, you've closed the loop. So you need to take that strategy and explain exactly how it would deal with a decline or a negative movement, a movement we don't want to see in that particular KPI. If a business has increasing staff turnover, you might investigate and uncover that it's partly to do with the perception of staff that they're not being trained adequately to perform well in their roles. Therefore, increasing staff training would address that particular issue and therefore lead to a reduction in staff turnover figures. Okay, so like I said before, I can't give you every possible combination in the notes here because your notes would be huge. Giving you examples just to kind of demonstrate how this works. So if we move on to the next strategy in our list, staff motivation. So back to this screen here. So now we isolate staff motivation. So again, all we're saying now is which of those KPIs on the left could be positively impacted by improving staff motivation in some way. And remember, for staff motivation, we have motivation theories. We also have motivation strategies. Okay, so which of those? Now, as I go through this, as before, I highlighted in green the ones that can be done. I've highlighted 3 in green here, okay? Now, when I do this in this video, I'm not saying that they are the only KPIs that could be positively impacted by carrying out some staff training in this case, or whatever one we're looking at. Sorry, staff motivation. We should be on, not staff training. I'm not saying that's the only ones, but what I'm going to do here is highlight in green the kind of more obvious connections, the more straightforward ones, because again, there's too much to talk about if we went everywhere. So basically, let's focus on the green ones there. Which KPIs could be positively impacted by current staff motivation theories or strategies? So the staff training you see there on the top of the right is wrong. There's a typo. So again, some examples. If a business is seeing an increase in staff absenteeism, they might choose to implement a motivation theory such as Maslow. This could help managers uncover any unmet motivational needs and come up with strategies to keep each employee as motivated as possible. If the business is experiencing a drop in productivity, it might be possible to implement the motivation strategy, performance-related pay. This could drive those who are motivated by financial rewards to work harder and more productively in order to reach targets that will see them reap individual financial rewards. Okay, so you can see how we're making the link between the strategy and the KPI and just coming up with a nice, not in huge detail here, just a nice simple couple of sentence explanation of how that strategy will assist you improve that particular KPI. So change in management styles and skills, the next one down. So I've got the screen right this time. So again, which KPIs on the left could be positively impacted by changing or management changing or improving their management styles or the skills that they're using? Okay. Once again, I'm just going to highlight a few here. Again, I'm not saying they're the only KPIs that could be impacted, but just off the top of my head, that's the quickest association. And again, here's an example of how you might use this one in a question. So if we're seeing an increase in staff turnover, it might be that managers using task-focused management styles, such as autocratic, that's getting staff offside. Okay, if management were to switch to a more people-centered approach, such as participative, employees might feel more motivated, more involved and empowered, and stay with the business rather than seek alternative employment. Therefore, that leads to a decrease in staff turnover. Increased investment in tech, same thing, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we just go through the process, the same process each time. Here's an example for increased investment in tech. If there's an increase in workplace accidents, there might be technology that could be implemented that would replace human input and therefore reduce the chance of accidents happening. Implementation of technology can lead to greater consistency, fewer errors, blah, 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 which can lead to a reduction in waste. Again, just a couple of examples, not the only examples that could potentially be used, but a couple of examples to demonstrate how you need to make these links. And for the rest of the strategies, the next 6, so on, exactly the same process. What's happening with our KPIs? What do we need to improve? How can we use one or maybe a combination of those 11 strategies to improve that particular KPI? Okay, so hopefully you see how this works. Really practice, doing more and more questions on this to kind of expose you to as many different combinations. That's the only way really to get this right and to really kind of nail it. And we'll practice lots of questions on this in class. That's the way to do it. The more you do, the more I think for most of you, this is easier than you might be thinking it is right now. The scenarios are generally not too complex that you're given. It generally isn't too hard to find a couple of logical links that you can use in responding in a question. But we have those 3 strategies listed in those 12, which we hadn't looked before. I mentioned the cost-cutting, redeployment, and innovation. So we will just quickly look at those. So like I said, all the other strategies, you already knew what they were, or you should know what they are, or you can refer back to your notes. These ones are new. Okay, so cost-cutting. Look, this one is kind of obvious, I think. But look, just reducing your costs. Simple as. That's cost cutting is simply that. Just as quickly as possible, reducing how much we're spending as a business. So as a strategy, cutting costs can be a really quick way to respond to negative trends in some KPIs, particularly profit. Okay. Remember, profit is revenue minus expenses. If you reduce the expenses, profit goes up. Simple as that. Okay. So some common ways which you might see businesses doing this: reducing employees, okay, making redundancies. One of the first strategies used, but you need to be careful about the potential short-term impact on profit because you need to make redundancy payments. So you need to think about maybe who you're making redundant. Remember, the longer that someone's been with you in the business and the higher the position that they hold, or the more they're paid, the higher the redundancy payment. So if you're going to get rid of some employees through redundancy, you do need to build into the equation that there might be some initial fairly substantial cost in terms of redundancy payments. But other than that, obviously in the medium to long term, that is going to reduce your cost base, which is a way of cutting costs, which leads to an improvement in profit. Another way to do it is to review all costs in the business and reduce or eliminate any non-essential costs. Okay, so for example, one of the first things that often disappears from businesses is stuff like staff travel, entertainment. So entertainment is like when you take out clients for lunch or something. A lot of that goes on in the business world. You'll take out a client you're trying to kind of sweet talk to come on board with you, or a customer that you're trying to get on board. You take them out to lunch and wine and dine them. That is the type of expense which normally disappears when we're trying to save money quickly. Staff travel. I did mention this one in class when we talked about this the other day, but staff travel now, there's a lot of people whose job it is to go around the country, the world even, meeting new clients, meeting existing clients, even maybe meeting the teams. You might manage teams that are based internationally. So historically, you'd actually physically travel and meet them. But now, particularly, a bit before COVID, but certainly since COVID, and everybody can work on Teams or lots of the other online software. Everybody now is set up to meet online. So there's kind of an easy fix for that one. Still, businesses prefer face-to-face often, but look, if you're trying to save money quickly, business class flights, expensive hotels, a lot of money, if you can do it via Zoom, there's a huge amount of money saved in the short term very, very quickly. A third one, selling assets to raise funds. So look, if you're short of money in a particular point in time, or you're losing profits, you're actually making a loss, do you have any assets in the business that you could sell to raise funds very, very quickly? Even if it's some of your key equipment that you use in your operations process, is it possible to sell that if it's worth a lot of money and then lease an equivalent machine? Okay, so then you're going to pay for it over a period of time. It's a good way of generating some money very, very quickly just through selling something that business has. Okay, so that's cost cutting. We can also reduce our energy costs. Okay, renewable energy. Can we put in place solar panels? Are there cheaper alternatives to the energy that we're currently using? Going back to global considerations for operations management, global sourcing of inputs, global outsourcing, I would suggest that those two, I've left in red overseas manufacture. I would not suggest that that's a quick way to cut costs, because you would need to set up a manufacturing plant overseas. But if you can somehow, if you're sourcing inputs locally, maybe in Australia, you might be able to quickly source some alternatives from overseas. That can cut your costs pretty quickly. Or global outsourcing, rather than doing a particular function here in Australia, is it possible to get an overseas business to do that particular function for you for cheaper? So again, there's more links back to other parts of the study design. Incentives for early payments of invoices. Could you give discounts maybe to your customers that pay on time or pay early, rather than them sort of sitting in the money and paying at the last minute, or even paying late? Again, another way to generate positive cash flow into the business. Okay, so cost cutting, which KPIs on left, positively impacted, and going back to the same thing. So these are fairly straightforward ones. But again, the black ones, I'm not saying necessarily are excluded from being able to help through cost cutting. I would say, generally speaking, they may be trickier connections to make, but certainly those green three there, it should be pretty simple to come up with a connection between cutting costs and improving those KPIs. Strategy 8, redeployment of resources, natural labour and capital, it says. Okay, what does this mean? Redeployment resources, process where a business process relocates or reallocates resources, such as materials, equipment, labour, to different departments, sites, countries, in order to improve efficiency and productivity and reduce wastage. Okay, so it's just shifting stuff around, using it in a different place in a different way. This might have jogged some of your memories. If you think back to Yakult, when we went on the Yakult tour, when they introduced the robotic arm to pack and shift the pallets, they said they'd redeployed the 5 or 6 staff that used to do that job, excuse me, to other areas of the business rather than making them redundant. That's an example of redeploying staff, okay, using those staff somewhere else in the business. If a business finds it has high levels of waste, or there's other inefficiency within its operations, it might be because there's inefficiencies in the way that the resources are allocated and used. Okay, so that's going to negatively impact KPIs such as level of waste, productivity. So you might be able to make gains in efficiency if you allocate your resources better. So for example, relocating premises, offices, factories, warehouses, that sort of thing. Changing the makeup of the workforce, okay? Between the jobs that they do. Do we need less of this type of person and more of another type of person? Changing or redirecting materials to different places. Moving resources and materials from one product to another, maybe. So lots and lots of different ways this plays out. But yeah, redeploying resources, just using our resources in a different way, in a different place. Strategy 9, so this is the final one which we'd not really come across explicitly. Innovation, there's a number of ways that this can happen within a business. You might be talking about creating completely new products or services. You might be talking about improving or inventing something that enhances or extends the life of a product or a service. You might be talking about improving how the product or the service is actually created, or you might be talking about how the product or service is actually accessed by customers. Okay, so lots of different ways that innovation plays out in a business. Now, this also, remember I was talking about how we're kind of doing two things here. We're looking at improving KPIs, but also seeking new business opportunities. This is really the first one for me, which also screams out seeking new business opportunities. Okay. So when we talk about seeking new business opportunities, which I'll do shortly, you could also probably slot this one in there as well. Okay. I'm going to give you 4 strategies, but you could also probably throw this one in there too. Because if you're going to create a new product, for example, that in and of itself is going to create potentially new business opportunities, something new that people can buy from you. So just by creating something new that people can buy, there's a new business opportunity. So you can also slot that in here, but of course here we're talking about focusing on responding to KPIs. So look, just summarizing here. Okay, so I've kind of skimmed through this as quick as I can, otherwise I'd be here talking forever. But hopefully, through what I've said so far and what you've seen on the screen, you get the idea of what you kind of need to be able to do, right? So what I'd suggest you do now, what I'm going to do is just flick through some screens with a KPI and some of those strategies. Just pause the video as I flick through each screen and just in your own head, just think, could I explain how those green strategies could help to improve the KPI that you're seeing on the left? Okay, so can you explain how each of the strategies in green on the right could be used to deal with the KPI on the screen? So that's what I'd encourage you to do now. I'm just going to scroll through. I'll just pause for a couple of seconds on each, but I would pause the video and just think, could I make the connections as I was doing earlier when we kind of went through this process? So percentage of market share. Could you now, just in your mind, just explain how implementing some staff training could help improve our market share? Could you explain how changing management styles or skills could improve our market share? Could you explain how improving quality in production could improve our market share? So on and so forth. And then just do the same with each of these. So I'm just going to slowly scroll through these. And like I say, I would suggest you pause and just make some of these connections and practice in your own mind if you kind of have the ability to do this. Okay, so productivity growth there. Okay, there's a whole bunch of ones which I think strategies which could help with there. Have our number of sales again. Have our absenteeism. So which of those green strategies could help you improve that? Staff turnover. Remember those two things. Probably similar strategies are going to work in similar ways on those two particular KPIs. Level of wastage. How could those 1, 2, 3, 4 green strategies help you improve, reduce our level of waste? Customer complaints. Again, how could those 5 green strategies help you reduce our number of customer complaints? Increase investment in technology, improving quality in production, innovation. How could they help you improve how many website hits we're getting? And so on and so forth. Okay, so that's that dealing with the responding to KPIs. So like I said at the beginning, I'm now going to talk separately about seeking new business opportunities because I think it just is a safer option. So what are we talking about here, seeking new business opportunities? Just to put that in perspective before we even get into this. Now, businesses generally has one of their objectives is to grow. Okay, most businesses are trying to grow. Okay, why do most businesses want to grow? Okay, because growing can lead to a number of benefits: more customers, more sales, more profits, the ability to employ more people, the ability to reap the rewards, the benefits that economies of scale brings. Lots and lots of benefits come from business growth. I mentioned economies of scale. I think you should probably know what this is, but just in case you don't, economies of scale, cost reductions that happen when you increase production. So your fixed costs, which you're going to incur no matter how much you're producing, administration, premises costs, that sort of thing, are spread over more units. But also, large businesses can take advantage of economies of scale by lowering variable costs, such as purchasing resources for a lower price because they're buying in bulk, for example. So I think most of you should have the idea of the concept of economies of scale, but that's a key benefit when businesses grow. They have access to economies of scale that smaller businesses just do not. So one way to grow is to sell more of the products and the service that you already sell. So that's definitely a strategy that all businesses pursue, okay? You want to sell more of what you're already producing. But there is another way to grow, and that is to start selling products and or services that you don't currently sell, or selling what you currently sell, but to people you don't currently sell to, okay? So you can classify that second category as new business opportunities. Okay, so selling products or services that you do not currently sell, that is a new business opportunity. That's why I said innovation fits in here, because one way to innovate is to do that. Or if you not changing your products or your services at all, but you find new people to sell them to who you are currently not selling to, that is also a new business opportunity. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Okay, managers should always be looking for new business opportunities, both at domestic and a global level. Okay, so within Australia, globally, much more because of globalization, it's much easier now to operate in some way on a global level. So what we're going to do here is look quickly at 4 strategies that managers can use to do this. Okay, and they're the 4 bullet pointed that we're going to look at. Okay, so this will, I think, make more sense as you understand what these strategies are. So our first strategy, which we can use to seek new business opportunities, building new business opportunities by opening new locations. So new branches, new outlets, new stores, whatever is applicable to that particular business. Opening new locations, okay? Now, these could be domestically, within the same city, the same state, could be another state, or they could be international. Okay, so that's, I think, fairly obvious. You look at, for example, Cotton On. Okay, they opened their first store in Geelong, 1991. They opened their first interstate store in 1994. Then New Zealand, 2006, Singapore, 2007, and now, as of 2023, they have around 1,500 stores in about 18 or 19 different countries. So new locations, that's the way to expand. And there's obviously lots of businesses you could think of, you know, all the retailers that you see in shopping centres, the known brands, they've started with one store and they've then grown and expanded their locations. Okay, so I'm also going to give you some advantages and disadvantages so you really have a complete set of notes thinking about what questions you may encounter in relation to this stuff as well. So just looking at some advantages and disadvantages, look, I don't think these are rocket science. I'm not going to talk through all of this stuff. This is really for your notes, but should be, I think, understandable. I'm looking down there now. I don't think there's anything particularly. Look, new markets may be difficult to understand and meet requirements as a disadvantage, I guess, particularly if you're talking overseas. You know, they may have different ways of doing business. There's different laws, different regulations that you're not familiar with, so that can present some challenges. Modifications to product services might be needed to work in new locations. So, you know, you might need to tweak a product for it to sell in a different market, particularly overseas. You know, what sells in Australia might not sell as well in somewhere in Asia, for example. If you try to sell it as is, you might need to tweak it somehow to appeal to that market. Think about McDonald's. You know, when you go to different countries, I think there's certain products like a Big Mac. I reckon probably most countries you could probably get a Big Mac, but when you go to certain countries, they also have like localized offerings as well, or they might tweak those main menu items, the most famous items to appeal to the local market, possibly. But yeah, communication language barriers, again, talking about in overseas. So I don't think that's too hard, but definitely include that in your notes, just in case we needed to discuss methods of seeking new business opportunities, and at least we have some advantages and disadvantages. Online sales, this is pretty straightforward. A business can increase both domestic and international sales by selling online. It's kind of a no-brainer. So in 2017, the 8 brands of the Cotton On Group came together to give customers access to all brands in one online destination. Okay, now you may not even be aware that the brands that you're seeing, they're actually part of Cotton On Group. Neither here nor there, they are. They're all kind of under Cotton On. They're all brands that Cotton On own. So now there's one website you can go. It links through to all of those brands, and they can now deliver locally, internationally, anywhere you like. So obviously that's a way to seek new business opportunities. You're particularly overseas, because these brands, some of them might operate overseas, but some of them might not. But they certainly don't operate across the whole planet. So you are now accessing customers in places where they don't have the option to buy from you any other way. So clearly, that's one way in which this becomes seeking new business opportunities. Again, advantages and disadvantages. Again, I don't think there's anything there I really need to explain particularly. I like the seasonal one, living in Australia. Most of the major markets are in the Northern Hemisphere, where the seasons are flipped. So that's a really, really big one for Australian businesses. When it's quiet in Australia, you've got a big market overseas to sell to potentially. Third one is exporting. So rather than actually opening new locations overseas, you might be able to sell your goods or services through local distributors or retailers who are based there already. Okay, so this is a slightly different play on opening new locations. So for example, Tim Tams. Tim Tams are now exported. They're sold in the supermarkets of over 40 different countries. And combining exporting with differentiation, which is our next strategy, they've also produced variations for some local markets. So, for example, in Indonesia, they sell cheese flavour Tim Tams. Sounds disgusting, but apparently that's what works in Indonesia. In Israel, they come with a kosher certification to appeal to that market. So you can see, again, accessing new business, driving new sales by exporting to markets which you previously did not sell to. Okay, pretty straightforward. Again, advantages and disadvantages, I don't need to talk through those. I will leave you to include those in your notes. I would just point out one little red thing I put in there: access overseas markets with large overseas populations. This is really key for Australia. Look, with a population of 25 odd million or something at the moment, which in world scale is pretty small. A lot of the products that we make in Australia would certainly appeal to similar countries with much bigger populations. So, if you're just going to operate within Australia, there's always kind of a ceiling that's going to limit your growth, which you can crash through if you start operating or selling overseas. 300 million people in North America, 70 million in the UK. I don't know, obviously the numbers are huge. But if you're limiting yourself to a population of 25 million, you can really, really seek massive new business opportunities by exporting to some of these other locations where your product would also work. And finally, differentiation. So a business can gain new business domestically by differentiating their offerings. So that means offering unique products or services that currently meet currently undermet customer needs or wants. Okay, so this can also work globally if you combine it with new locations, online sales, or exporting. But look, a range of different ways to differentiate. Technology improvements. Okay, innovate your products, such as new flavors. Niche marketing, okay, marketing to particular groups of people, focusing on your brand image, improving durability. That's just 5 ways in which you can differentiate your product somehow to seek new business opportunities. So again, coming back to Tim Tam, okay, the original Tim Tam was introduced in 1964, which was actually a copy of an English biscuit called a Penguin. Poms living in Australia, there's always this fight, which is better, a penguin or a Tim Tam. I'm definitely in the penguin camp, but I don't mind a Tim Tam. But anyway, the initial one, 1964, Then they've introduced new flavours and varieties, mocha, hazelnut, blah, 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 so on and so forth. 2004, limited edition alcoholic flavours. 2014, the Adriano Zombo range to respond to, I guess, that was, he became famous through MasterChef. So they kind of jumped on the MasterChef bandwagon. 2017, so on and so forth. So basically the same product, but different varieties to appeal to new customer base. I guess what's out of interest here, in 2021, Arnott's conducted a survey of over 1,000 people over 18, which was a favourite, and the original, created in 1964, still over a third of people, that's still their favourite. So despite all of this differentiation and creating all these new product lines and varieties, still over a third of people seem to prefer the original. Okay, again, advantages and disadvantages for differentiation as a way to seek new business opportunities. Again, nothing rocket science in there. I'll leave you to pause the video and get those into your notes. So look, just summarizing. Look, well, we talked about a lot of stuff in this video. Given some KPI data, describe some strategies that could be used to improve that data or recognize from within some case material provided. That's your choices of strategy. And then finally, suggest strategies that business could use to seek new business opportunities. And here you're going to choose from those 4. And that is it. Fairly big one there, guys. But look, that's probably the biggest one in this whole outcome. I will catch you in the next one for Key Knowledge 3. See you then. Cheers for now.